guys, I'm Chelina, and this is Mysteries at the Coffee Shop. I want to introduce you to our temporary podcast host. Her name is Aubrey. Say hello.
Hello.
So Courtney, again, as I said, is taking a leave right now to focus on her health. So Aubrey is going to take her place in the meanwhile. So let's just get started. Today's episode is on the Notorious Skinwalkers and Wendigos. We did go into a lot of research for this, and there is a lot of lore and speculation around it. So these are pretty famous on TikTok. Pretty popular on TikTok. There's a huge thread. So Aubrey's going to start out with going over Skinwalkers, because that is what she did her half of the research on.
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily know where to start with this. So I just kind of started educating myself, and that is majority of what I want to talk about on the topic of Skinwalkers and the legend around that. So first, I want to say that this is considered like the study of Skinwalkers and cryptids and such is considered like a pseudoscience.
That's kind of cool.
Which a pseudoscience, if you don't know the definition of that, is a scientific study that doesn't follow the scientific method. So it's kind of like, doesn't follow all the textbook rules and kind of colors outside the lines a little bit.
Right.
It doesn't really, doesn't conform to the main steps of that. So way back about 800 to 1,000 years ago, the largest native indigenous tribe in America was the Navajo, the Navajo Nation. It was like an empire in the western United States and down into some of Mexico as well, which is crazy to me because the TikTok thread, the TikTok hashtag Skinwalkers is like all over the United States.
Right.
And this is majority out west, and this is like a legend from the west, geographically in the United States. So people who are posting from New York and being like, oh my gosh, and using this terminology that is very touchy for a lot of cultures, specifically the Navajo people, kind of makes me like stroke my beard a little bit.
Right.
But so the founding kind of background story to the legend of the Skinwalker, specifically from the Navajo culture, stems from their healers. So they had different kinds of healers. The majority of the Navajo people were concerned more with like traditional skills like horsemanship, farming, silversmith, and textiles were what the Navajo people were known for. Majority. They traded a lot of textiles and silver. And then there was like this, again, like kind of outside of the box practice. There were healers that practiced herbalism, a lot of healing through singing, and what they called sand painting.
Sand painting?
Sand painting is, it's one word, and it's sand painting, like you would paint on a canvas. And what that means is it's a place where gods it's a place where gods come and go.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the healers would use sand painting as a tool to help heal people. And in the Navajo culture, if you were ill, if you were diseased, if you were injured, they determined that as like you were out of harmony with the universe. So it wasn't the traditional like disease that we think of today. It was you're out of harmony and you need to get back into the harmony.
Right. Which is like, in today's world, it's like, you have a bacterial disease caused by this, let me give you these antibiotics. Exactly. Which is essentially like, I think, yeah, it's an unbalance, actually. It's an unbalance of bacteria. You're not supposed to have that much. So I would agree with that.
So yeah. That's like, I feel like that'd probably be like the basis of illness. Like you break your leg, it's out of harmony. Your bones are out of harmony with one another.
That's not normal. It's not supposed to be like that. Sorry.
Sure not. So the whole legend, the whole lore of Skinwalkers goes back to these Navajo healers. They wanted to restore harmony to their patients. And then there were the few healers, few and far between, that didn't care so much to restore harmony. They had more, what was believed to be more selfish or ulterior motives. And yeah, so anyone who was a healer, who had these skills and knew of these like practices and spells, for lack of a better term, I guess, they practiced these rituals. And people who had this skill set, if they used it in a negative manner, they were cursed. Something would happen to these healers who used their skill set for evil. So specifically, I read a lot about if they, do you use the word unalive, or do you say murder straight up?
We could use unalive for TikTok safety, but we're on YouTube and Spotify and marked like explicit. So yeah, they did the murder.
Okay, so they did the murder. Specifically, if it was like a family member or a sibling or a loved one they were close with that they turned on, and they used their skill set for evil, and they flipped it around, did the opposite of what they were brought up to do and what they were taught to do.
Right.
They would become cursed, especially if they murdered a family member or a sibling. I heard a lot of my sources said sibling over and over.
Right. It's different when it's like a random person and somebody you know, because if it's somebody you know, like that's a betrayal.
That's a different type of
trusted you. Yeah, that's a different type of, because you know what I mean? They trusted you. Like, I would not expect my sister, this is a horrible example, I would not expect my sister to like throw a rock at me or whatever. She really would in real life, but I'm just putting that out there.
So yeah, I mean, that's like the deepest, worst type of flip around, turn around on your family, or anyone for that matter. So specifically when these healers would murder someone they loved or someone that loved them, that had a lot of trust in them, it would create a supernatural event. And I saw in a lot of sources also said that these healers that became dark supernatural forces, a lot of the time they were more men than women, and they don't seek to intermingle so much with humans. So once they experienced the supernatural event and they became shapeshifters or however you want to refer to them, they can be out in the daylight, they can hang out around other folks, around normal folks, but they're going to keep their distance for the most part. I've seen a lot of things that said like they're not going to enter your dwelling, but they just want to wreak havoc and raise hell.
That seems interesting because from like obviously it's not something like I truly looked into until we did this episode. But that's kind of interesting because a lot of people are just like, don't go out at night, don't do this. But like that, that makes me, I learned something new today. And that makes me think like that's probably why they're so feared. And then the Navajo people, they don't talk about it because like, you don't know who
It's taboo.
is. Yeah, it's taboo. You don't know who it is. You don't know like who you're inviting into your home. Like I get it now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I didn't know that they could hide out in the day, in disguise. You would never know.
Yep. But that's how, so the whole belief and the whole, I guess taboo to the story is that these Navajo people, they didn't know who to trust. After this started happening, after they began experiencing these healers turn, they refuse to talk about it. You can't give, or you can't get people of a Navajo culture to discuss this because it's so taboo, because they have trust issues with it now. It's terrifying. I think that we have to, whether we believe it or we don't believe it, there has to be a lot of respect because these people are deeply, deeply terrified of these beings who terrorized their ancestors.
Right. And like, it is kind of rude to just brush it off because like this being is so deep rooted into their culture. It changes the way that they did certain things. I
for sure
really think there is a respect for it, and I understand when people get upset when they talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to live in the dark about it. Like, I have to know something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm obviously, this isn't going to be brought up in a normal conversation. This isn't going to be like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, they're not something I normally talk about. Definitely. Because I understood the stigma and I was like, you don't do that. Of course, we have this podcast to discuss and like talk about mysteries in general. And it's just really interesting to learn about, and it makes me understand and respect their culture.
I think learning more about it and the background to it and why these people are so, they don't want to discuss these things is helpful to be able to learn why, hey, maybe we shouldn't dig farther than we need to dig into it. Just say, hey, this is a big mystery. It's really great to talk about, but I have more respect for it now that I know than before.
Exactly. If someone was like, you digging too deep, I'd be like, say less.
Yeah, right. I understand. This is scary. This is no joke.
Right. And we're just scratching the surface.
For sure, yeah.
Mainly, did this episode because there was some confusion about it. Mm-hmm. Like, because you see all these things on TikTok, but
right.
What is true and what's not true, you know? So I guess, like, I do have a couple questions for you. Like, where, do you know where in the United States the Navajo, like, reign specific, like, state-wise? Like,
so, Arizona, a lot through Arizona and New Mexico, down over the modern-day United States-Mexico border, into Mexico a little bit. So that's why it's good to respect regardless and just have this knowledge regardless. But these people who are having experiences in Florida or Maine or, like, I don't know, the Gulf Coast, the Atlantic Coast, the East Coast, like it's not as applicable, and there are different beings from different ancient, old indigenous cultures. So, everyone has an explanation for these supernatural events that they experience and witness, but these beings, specifically these dark healers that have turned over, you're not gonna have an experience with that in Florida.
Right.
You're just not.
Right. It's like not the same thing.
No.
Right. And like, I know even saying the name and like describing it or whatever they believe that brings them into your life, that you're calling out to them. Mm-hmm. So like, it is kind of scary I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You know, I think people looked into it and they didn't try to dig that deep.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, I am seeing these things. Well, are you, or did you just watch too many TikToks?
Right.
I'm less likely to believe it if somebody said something like in Florida.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And there are other critters, other wild animals that can mimic human interaction. They can mimic human voice, and it can, I don't know, not behave necessarily like a human, but behave like a human, for lack of a better explanation. We know there are plenty of critters out there, birds in all parts of the world, that can speak words of any language like a human, which is terrifying in and of itself. But I mean, even here in Tennessee, growing up, I had an experience with a bobcat that sounded like a woman, and it scared me out of my skin. But it's like I was able to figure those things out, and it wasn't a supernatural event or an experience. There were critters, wild animals behind that. So
right, and that's not you like dismissing that they're not real. It's more like
sure. Yeah,
it's more like they're more going to be in the realm of where in the West, rather than the East.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is more of a like little boy cried wolf or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that, and like, can I just say that there are some creatures who they're so smart. Like birds are my least favorite patient.
Yeah, agreed.
Because I don't know, dogs and cats. Yes, dogs and cats will, like, when they don't like you, they're like, I'm bite you. Yeah. I'm scratch you. Birds, like, I'm gonna call you a whore, which has definitely happened to me before. I cried a little bit when I left that room.
A bird will send you to therapy, and a dog will send you to the hospital, period.
Exactly.
Like,
period.
I think I'd rather get a couple stitches than like mental scarring.
Oh yeah, that was emotional damage, homie. I'm just saying. But back to the main topic. In all seriousness, my next question for you is, when obviously you didn't get a lot of firsthand accounts because people don't really like to talk about it, but when you talk about the being and people saying that they've seen it, what do they describe?
So, there are just a handful. It's not a wide variety of creatures that these beings can take the physical form of. I've got a couple here. So like wolves, foxes, bears, not so much a deer. They're just a lot of the creatures, a lot of the physical forms that have been reported over the years are big, lumbering, furry creatures that just have a soulless look, whether it's eyes that are described as being like evil glowing eyes or just dark empty eyes.
Okay.
A lot of experiences include like unreasonably large, like moose size almost animals, like a dog that is the size of a large deer or a moose.
I would shit myself.
They'll just kind of like lope next to a vehicle. They'll just kind of hang out and it'd scare the fire out of you and then disappear. Like there are so few attacks. So that to me begs more of the question, like, yeah, we'll see their physical form, but what do they want? Are they angry? Right. Or are they still just wanting to wreak havoc? Like, they made these choices to use their abilities and their skill sets for poor decisions, for evil, for murder, literally. What do they want still?
They're just like agents of chaos.
Right, and
evil.
If they're so large, that must mean they're strong.
I'm not quite sure on that one, but I did notice something when you were mentioning their forms. So a lot of the ones that you named off, they're primarily carnivores. I mean, bears and foxes are omnivorous, and then wolves have been known to, like, you know, they eat blackberries.
Yeah.
Which is really cute. But
whatever's there.
Exactly. Like, they'll eat meat, but they're like, oh, blackberries are okay after all. But they're primarily carnivores, so they don't necessarily turn into deer. I know on my TikTok, was a little bit confused because, you know, I think in the Appalachia, like around this area, I've heard a lot of people saying that skinwalkers are related to not deer. But and because of what you just said, that's probably not true.
Right.
Because they primarily turn into, like, these ferocious beings.
Yeah. Just, like, full of anger and bloodlust.
Are not in relation to not deer.
Right.
I don't know where that came from. I just heard about it in the area, and that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
I think that people are misunderstanding.
I think things are just getting lumped together. So, I mean, I grew up hearing scary stories of things living in the woods. Because I grew up out in BFE, in the boonies in Tennessee, and there were stories, campfire stories all day long of creatures in the woods that'll mess you up if you go wandering around where you shouldn't be, or will just, like, kind of hang out on the rough edges of your property and terrify you for fun.
For funsies.
And I really don't think that's the same thing that these Navajo people are worried about, that they experienced when they had healers that did a switcheroo.
And I would think, like, that's the ultimate evil, because if you're a doctor and you promise to help people and heal people, that's betrayal right there. Like I mentioned earlier, so that I think that ties in with how evil this thing is. And that's wild.
There's a very, very strong spiritual side to all of this. Because I've had a personal encounter with a shaman healer. And I mean, that was, like, incredibly powerful spiritual experience for me. So, I mean, I don't know. These healers are incredibly powerful.
Right. Okay.
Pretty nerve-wracking.
Right. Did you have any more information on them, like, that could help us, give us more insight, or if that's all you found, that's okay too?
Let me check. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I didn't want to get so much into the specific stories that people have shared around a campfire. That's what I wanted to steer as clear as possible from. My intent was to give some background and some history to these creatures that are being witnessed, and these people are having experiences out in the western half of the United States with these animals who are very powerful and scary, very scary.
Right. Okay. So I just want to politely ask, I know that was you basically saying that, that's all you have right now. Let's get into the next topic. So I went and researched Wendigos because, like I said earlier, for whatever reason, the two are, like, tied together,
closely
which
related.
Makes no sense to me.
Media.
Yeah, in today's media, which makes no sense to me because they're from two different areas. Like, two completely different areas. So you ask yourself, what is a Wendigo? And it goes by many names. So it goes by Wendigo, Wittigo, we two go. Roughly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because this is a lore and a being from multiple tribes up in the north. So, but basically it translates into the evil spirit that devours mankind.
Nice.
Isn't that very ominous?
Yeah.
The Wendigo lore comes from Native American tribes that reside around the Great Lakes of Michigan, the Atlantic coast, and parts of Canada. The main three that popped up were the Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Algonquin.
Okay.
So it's described as a malevolent, cannibalistic, supernatural being that is essentially the embodiment of greed, gluttony, murder, and corruption.
Wow.
It's highly associated with winter, famine, and starvation, and they're said to be cursed to wander the land eternally seeking to fulfill their voracious appetite for human flesh. And when it has nothing to eat, it starves itself to death. Mm-hmm. Pretty much. So I guess my question for you is, like, what do you know so far about Wendigos, other than, like, what I've told you so far?
Not a whole lot. Mm-hmm. That, which means nothing. I know nothing about them.
So, I was really looking into it, and I thought this was, like, a physical being, but it actually can be a physical or spiritual being. So, essentially, there are two ways that you get a Wendigo. So, one of the ways to get a Wendigo is the most well-known way, which is just to eat human flesh. They say that eating human flesh turns you into something else, mm-hmm. Some sort of monster, right? You get a craving for that flesh. Another way to get a Wendigo mm-hmm. is to be a human being who has sinned. And by sinned, I mean you are greedy, you're gluttonous, you're corrupt, you're very selfish. You just want more and more and more. It said that the spirit of the Wendigo can easily possess these people, and the way that it does it is it goes into their dream and it bites them, and then they slowly get more evil, more corrupt, and they turn into the same monster as I described before, who has the appetite for flesh. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea behind that is that, animal flesh isn't enough. Mm-hmm. You're greedy. You want more. You want people flesh. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea behind of it. The Cree are the ones that, they really believe that it's an evil spirit that possesses humans. Either way, Wendigos are primarily derived from the sin of humans. So, description-wise, when I think of a Wendigo, I always think of the things from Until Dawn, mm-hmm. which I have pooped myself many times while playing that. I have not actually pooped myself. I have to put that out there. Must clarify. But my soul left my body multiple damn times playing that game.
Yep.
And I think of those things from Until Dawn, like the 15 feet tall, just emaciated, sunken eyes, ashen skin, like creeping around on the ceiling at night. That's what I imagine as a Wendigo. However, boy was I wrong, because they actually come apparently in different forms. So I found this little snippet online. It did not tell me exactly where it came from, but it's an Ojibwe native describing what a Wendigo was, and I quote, "It was a large creature as tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath was strange, its footprints full of blood. It ate any man, woman, or child who ventured into its territory, and those were the lucky ones. Sometimes the Wendigo chose to possess a person instead, and then the luckless individual became a Wendigo himself, hunting down those he had once loved and feasting upon their flesh."
Yeah.
Yeah, that description was pretty wild.
That is hardcore.
That was actually pretty hardcore. Now, like I said earlier, there are other variations of the Wendigo, so some have described it to be hairless or have matted fur.
Okay.
Some of them have pointed ears, horns, or antlers like a deer. Mm-hmm. That's the other one that I'm familiar with. But the one thing that is always there, that always stands out, is it smells like death.
Yeah.
Like just rotting flesh.
I'd understand it.
Right, because this thing is like, that was the main thing. That did not change. with its physical appearance
Mm-hmm.
is that it just, you could not miss it. You knew when they were around. They smelled so bad. So bad. And I want to give you another description that is given by a scholar in Ontario. It's an Ojibwe teacher. So his description is the Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation. Its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody, unclean, suffering from separation of flesh. The Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomp, of death and corruption. Every description I have is like really scary.
Yeah.
So it's pretty horrifying. So upon looking into further folklore and myth, I think the scariest part for me was that they aren't like mindless beings. Like, right? They're people.
Mm-hmm.
They're people who have turned into this horrible being and monster that just is so hungry that it'll just eat and eat and eat and never be full. They say that it grows bigger depending on the size of its meal. So if that's the case, it's never full.
Yeah.
So let's say it eats a bigger person, it grows bigger. So that meal does nothing.
Yeah.
And it's still emaciated. It's cursed.
Yeah.
But not only that, again, they're not mindless. So they actually have the ability to speak. Some can mimic voices, and they can use tools.
What kind of tools?
I don't know.
Oh no.
I didn't look into that. I got a little scared.
Yeah, rightfully so.
But there is a folk story that was collected in the early 20th century by Lottie Marston. She is an ethnographer of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, so she collects like folklore stories.
Right.
And these are all oral stories, so I just want to read this off to you guys. One time, long ago, a big Wendigo stole an Indian boy. But the boy was too thin, so the Wendigo didn't eat him up right away. But he traveled with the Indian boy for him till he get fat. The Wendigo had a knife, and he cut the boy on the hand to see if he was fat enough to eat, but the boy didn't get fat. They traveled too much. One day, they came to an Indian village, and the Wendigo sent the boy to the Indian village to get some things for him to eat. He just gave the boy so much time to go there and back. The boy told the Indians that the Wendigo was near them, and showed them his hand where the Wendigo cut to see if he was fat enough to eat. They heard the Wendigo calling the boy. He said to the boy, "Hurry up, don't tell lies to those Indians." All of the Indians went to where the Wendigo was and cut off his legs. They went back to see if he was dead. He wasn't dead. He was eating the juice, or marrow, from the inside of the bones of his legs that were cut off. The Indians asked the Wendigo if there was any fat on them. He said, "You bet there is. I've eaten lots of Indians. No wonder they were fat." The Indians then killed him, cut him to pieces, and that was the end of the giant Wendigo.
Speechless.
I was like, I would feel uncomfortable if I heard one speaking to me.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Uncomfortable. And there's something about just tall, lanky creatures.
Skin and bones
that I get.
Looking at it coming from like an animal medicine perspective, seeing an animal creature just emaciated and either naked to the skin or covered in matted fur, and it eating and eating and eating and never gaining weight, you're like, what is wrong? What is going on right now?
Hyperthyroid.
Oh no. Yeah.
So another thing that I learned was that for these people, just like the Skinwalker, for these people, the Wendigo is a real thing.
Oh, for sure.
It's for sure a real thing. So there's actually a medical term behind the name. It's called Wendigo psychosis. And I'll quote this exactly. So it is described as a severe culture-bound syndrome occurring among Northern Algonquin Indians living in Canada and the northern eastern United States. The syndrome is characterized by delusions of becoming possessed by a flesh-eating monster and is manifested in symptoms including depression, violence, a compulsive desire for human flesh, and sometimes actual cannibalism.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's basically... It's this psychosis that, like, has generally just occurred for the people around the Great Lakes of Canada and the United States. It usually develops during winter when they're isolated.
Yeah.
So the people who have gone through Wendigo psychosis, their initial symptoms are poor appetite, nausea, and vomiting. And they, for whatever reason, they just... Every day goes by and they just see other people and they just keep thinking about how edible they are.
Yeah.
And then they have an exaggerated fear of becoming cannibals.
Mm-hmm.
Because, no one wants to be a Wendigo. Right?
Right.
But there has been actually, actual real reported cases of Wendigo psychosis. Like, it is a real thing for these people.
Mm-hmm.
But what is interesting is that it's specifically culture bound.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't happen outside of any culture other than that the Native Americans in that area.
Mm-hmm.
They have not really seen it in anybody else. Mm-hmm. One of the most famous cases of Wendigo psychosis involves a man named Jack Fiddler, who in 1907, along with his brother, strangled and killed his daughter-in-law in order to keep her from becoming a Wendigo. And it was thought that she suffered from Wendigo psychosis.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like he did.
Yeah, I think so. He was actually known to kill and enslave Wendigos, and I think she went into Wendigo psychosis, and they just they offed her.
Yeah, they said, we're not watching you go downhill like this."
Right, and they were put on trial, and one of them, it was not good. But again, that's how real it was. They literally off people because they thought they were going to turn into Wendigos.
Yeah.
So another example is a man named Swift Runner. He was a Cree fur trapper from Alberta, Canada. So in 1878, he and his family were starving during a harsh winter and his eldest son died. And he just felt like he had no other option. He ate him. And unfortunately, he also killed and ate his wife and remaining children as well.
Wow.
And food was actually, pretty close, 25 miles from them, which...
That's far on foot.
It's far on foot, but I don't know if they were on foot.
For the sake of your family?
Yeah. Something happened after he ate his son, dude.
Yeah.
I don't know. So... A lot of people think that the Wendigo is more or less a metaphor. Right? So, way back when, before, social media and, modern day, these people, up north, famine and starvation was a real thing during the winter.
Yeah.
And a lot of people believe that the lore of the Wendigo was created to show the importance of working together and not being greedy. Mm-hmm. Because in times like that, you can't be greedy. You have to rely on each other in order to survive. So some people think that, the Wendigo is a metaphor. Mm-hmm. But for them, it's real. Yeah. It's a way of life. Yeah. You can't be greedy. You can't be corrupt. It's a tight, close community. And if you want to survive... You can't be any of those things.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, yes, I believe people can, they can turn into Wendigos. They can turn into these, because if you are those things, you essentially are a monster. You don't care about anyone else or anyone. And I think that's what's scary.
Yeah, I feel like a good explanation for both of these beings is just the core loss of empathy and humanity.
It's literally people, like you said, losing their humanity and becoming something that they're not, becoming something that's almost not recognizable as a human.
Yeah.
And
they
that
just do such a hardcore U-turn onto who they were and what they were brought up believing and practicing, and the whole core belief of their surroundings and the people they know just flipped.
exactly.
So polar flipped.
Exactly. And it amazes me that like they like put these closely together, because they're really not the same thing. One of them is more of a,
they're different. It's different experience, different lessons, question mark, like greed and then betrayal. Like they're different.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, it did really tie into that. And those are like, you know what I mean? Those are things that like, and honestly, like I want to say like that is really real.
Yeah.
Like people are monsters. And can they turn into, essentially yes.
Yeah.
Essentially yes. But like we still want to be respectful towards these cultures and stuff. To them it's not just stories. It's a way of life.
Yeah.
And I just think now looking back at it, like the TikToks and all that stuff about them is like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of, I mean, it's kind of sad to see people who lack the education. And I wouldn't even say that I'm terribly, extremely educated on it, even after a couple weeks of research. Still not. I mean, I wasn't able to sit down. I wasn't able to sit down with anyone and get firsthand one-on-one experience from someone who was raised hearing these things, or seeing these things or the like. So I definitely wouldn't go anywhere close to saying, well, I've got some education on this, because I don't. But seeing all of the things in the modern media is sad, and I can't imagine seeing it from an indigenous, like Navajo person's point of view, and just feeling like, wow, these folks have no clue. That is like the scariest thing that our people and our ancestors could have possibly faced. And all of these folks are like,
This is
out in Missouri, just, oh my God, a Skinwalker or the Wendigo.
Or like, this is a fun video game. This is
right, a video game, yeah.
Which I will say, I do want to put this out there that the only reason I knew about the Skinwalker was because of a video game. It was because of a video game.
Yeah.
And you wonder if like that's crossing the line, because like you're taking their culture, their beliefs, something that they strongly believe in, and turning it into a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
Which I did not think about it like that. It's really hard to, think in a different perspective and understand why someone is upset. It's hard to do that, and it's hard to be humbled by that. But I think this was a pretty like humbling experience.
Oh, definitely.
Right, because like, I mean, don't get me wrong. That game that I was talking about with the Skinwalker, it described all those things, and it was really scary. But like that's a real thing to them.
Yeah.
For me, it was shits and giggles. For them, it's real. It's not a joke, and it's not funny.
It's history.
It is history. It's tied in with their culture, and I understand that, like, every culture has some sort of being that they're scared of, and it is pretty deep-rooted.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, if someone asks you to respect it, I mean, I guess I just would.
Yeah.
Like, and if you disrespect it, I think, like, it would be in your best interest to apologize.
Agreed.
But, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think that ends our discussion for today. I really think this was a pretty good discussion, actually.
Yeah,
it wasn't
a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't bad at all. So, if you guys like this video podcast, give us a like, comment, subscribe, and subscribe.
Definitely subscribe.
Open our merch shop on our link tree because I design all those myself.
There's some really, really cute designs up there right now.
Yes.
Really cute.
Yes, our podcast host, Alice, has her own design. And I will be working on another design, which involves, like, Courtney's dog and, like, making her a little, like... I'm making her a little cryptid, is basically, so... but...
Little creepy dog cryptid merch.
Yeah, little creepy dog cryptid. But... yeah, give us a like, follow, subscribe, and then Aubrey is probably going to be here for the next episode. Again, I don't know when Courtney is coming back, but I will ask her. But thank you guys so much. Bye!